Hey, what's going on, Roleplayers? It's the Bard here, and welcome back to the corner. It's time for part 2 of our Sorcerer Analysis. So we're going over Divine Soul, Shadow Magic, and Storm Sorcery.
Something is stuck in underneath my skin as I'm looking in for something with.
So first up is Divine Soul, and I am torn on this class. So Divine Magic is giving you the capacity to swap out Sorcerer spells and put Cleric spells in its place. Now I really don't know how I feel about this. On the one hand, you've got 2 spell lists in which you can choose from, but on the other hand, in order to have access to those 2 spell lists, you basically lose out on the ability to have any other special functions. You just become a kind of catch-all caster. I think the strongest benefit of it is that you don't have to do any multiclassing in order to get certain spells, and more importantly, you don't have to do any multiclassing and you can still get the highest level spells. So there are benefits to being a Divine Soul. Still, you're going to lose out on certain abilities. By not going into Cleric, you're going to lose out on things like Channel Divinity. Also, you're not really getting any special sorceress advantages like Wild Magic, for example. I don't think it's a bad option. I just think it's quite a limiting option in role-playing perspective. However, it is quite strong in the sense that your primary ability is your meta magic. That is one of the core things that sets Sorcerer apart from other classes. So your ability to use Cleric spells with meta magic feats is something that should really be considered. I think it's what makes this class shine the most, but it is its core feature. But I think it's the only thing that really redeems this kind of Sorcerer's origin. I think if you want a really specific kind of character with a very tailored spell list, this is the reason you take Divine Soul. So favoured by the gods, if you fail an attack roll or fail a saving throw, you can use this ability to get 2d4 and add it onto the total, possibly changing the outcome. It's interesting in that you get to see the fact that you failed and then try to do something about it afterwards, unlike some of the other abilities where you get to see the number, and as long as you haven't been told the outcome, then you can attempt to do something about it. So it is beneficial in that sense that if you know that you failed, if your GM has said, okay, you have failed this roll, then you can activate it then. You don't have to kind of weigh up the options and make the decision. So it is slightly more beneficial. And 2d4 isn't a bad amount. It's anywhere between 2 and 8 additional bonus to either your attack roll or your saving throw. And that can usually make the difference. So I don't see it as a bad thing. This ability refreshes every time you take a rest, so it's not bad at all, and it doesn't cost you any sorcerer points like a similar ability from, say, the Wild Mage. It is good, but it's just a bit plain. In all honesty, I think Empowered Healing is only just marginally better than the Empowered Meta Magic ability. I think its real strength is the fact that you can use it to empower the abilities of the other people who are close to you. It stacks up very well with the Life Cleric's Channel Divinity, allowing for some very efficient healing. However, you are supposed to be a sorcerer. You are supposed to have a very specific skill set, and I don't think basically being a crutch for another player character is a good use of your time or your sorcery points. As I've said before, it's not amazing to have the ability to fly at level 14 when you can cast it as a spell at level 5. This ability is only marginally better than the Draconic Wings because your fly speed is set at 30 and it's not based on your current speed, so any changes to your current speed isn't going to affect your fly speed. However, I did get a good comment on the last video about the wings and how beneficial they can be in certain areas. The fact that they are a bonus cast, the fact that you don't require concentration, which is quite a big thing in this edition. But at the same time, I still think that if you need to be flying, then there's a good chance that the rest of your party need to be flying. And if that's the case, then you need to make a cast and get everyone the ability to fly. Ultimately, as with everything, it's a case-by-case situation. So there are benefits, there are drawbacks. I still think that when you make the comparison between a low-level ability to cast fly and a high-level ability to just be able to do it naturally, it's just not quite there in my opinion. So Unearthly Recovery is useful once per day, and you can use it to regain half of your current maximum hit points. There's really nothing more to say about this other than you basically have 50% additional hit points. It's a bonus action, doesn't require any sorcery points, doesn't require any spell slots, and it's just this freebie that you get. It's a very strong heal. I'd say that Divine Soul lends itself quite well to being a melee sorcerer, because of the ability to add to your attack rolls and the fact that you have some empowered healing which you can use in a pinch. So it's probably good if you're up front and you're getting hit a lot of the time. That, coupled with the fact that you can have pretty much any spell you like from either the Cleric or the Sorcerer list, allows you a lot of options. But other than that, I don't think you're really getting very much. I would have preferred to have something that was a bit more congenial to a variety of different gods. Something that speaks volumes about your faith and the kind of path that you're on. Perhaps Law could have had a bonus to armor class, perhaps Evil could have had a bonus to damage, and Good could have had that bonus to healing. Sadly, I think this origin is lacking in character, and its only real strength is the ability to not have to pick between being a sorcerer or being a cleric.
What you feeling on the inside, you should try to remember.
Now, I quite enjoy Shadow Sorcerer. It's got a lot of good abilities in it. Not everything is amazing, but it does have some good features. Eyes of the Dark is giving you dark vision up to 120 feet, which is fine for some races, but not necessarily for others. However, what I do like about this ability is that it improves with level. Once you get up to level 3, you get the capacity to cast Darkness by spending some sorcery points. You also learn Darkness as a freebie spell, which you can cast normally. Ultimately though, I think you should be casting it using your sorcery points. Firstly, when you do so, you can see in the darkness that you create. More importantly though, Darkness is a second level spell. If you were converting sorcery points into a second level slot, it would cost you 3 points to do so. So if you're going to cast Darkness, I'd say always go with the sorcery points, as long as you've got them to spare. This is especially beneficial if you have, say, a Warlock in your party as well, who's got Devil's Sight. You can see in your own darkness, your Warlock can see in the darkness. The two of you together can gang up pretty well on anyone who's in the radius of this spell. Strength of the Grave works somewhat like an Orc's Relentless Endurance. Since it comes for free with the class, I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. It's just for me, however, I'd like to be a bit more proactive in my survival. I would like to be taking more precautions, like casting the right spells, or being in the right position, or just having the right amount of advantage. So relying on something that only happens when I'm about to die, it does have a value, I just don't think it's that high. Hound of Ill-Omen has to be one of my favourite sorceress abilities. So first of all, it only costs you 3 sorcery points to invoke this creature, but it doesn't require any kind of concentration either. This thing has bonus hit points, it has the ability to move through difficult terrain. At the start of your turn, it automatically knows its target's location, so it can't hide from you. But my absolute favourite ability is that any creature that is within 5 feet of it has disadvantage on saving throws against any spells you cast. You only need to spend 3 sorcery points to get a creature which gives you heightened spell for its entire duration. How great is this thing? Since Hound of Ill-Omen is invoked as a bonus action, it doesn't interfere with your regular casting. So you get to throw this out, it gets to attack, you get to use your spells, and the creature has disadvantage on any saves against it. I think this is one of the best abilities overall for almost any of the sorceress classes. I think this ability's only disadvantage is the fact that the creature has to be next to the Hound of Ill-Omen in order for it to get the disadvantage on saving throws, meaning certain spells like fireballs aren't really going to be a very good choice because you're going to end up dealing damage to your own creature. I think Shadow Sorcerer lends itself more to a more subtle style of play rather than just blowing things apart, but if that is your style, then I'd definitely say this is the one to go for. Shadow Orc's alright, but I'm a little bit disappointed by it. Basically, it works exactly the same as the Shadow Monk's ability. The only difference is you get twice as much range. However, the Shadow Monk gets this at level 6. Why should you have to wait until level 14? You don't even get advantage on any attack rolls after you've made your Shadow Step. It's not a terrible ability, it's just far too late in your progression. Umbral Form is giving you resistance to almost everything apart from a couple of specific energy types. It's basically like having Stone Skin, Protection from Energy, and Gaseous Form all rolled into one. And of course you're not having to use any concentration either. All this for 6 sorcery points, the equivalent of a 4th level spell slot. This is a really strong defense, and it's probably a good level for you to get this ability. Since you move through objects as though they were difficult terrain, it would suggest to me that things like material components for spells wouldn't be an issue, because you can still somewhat interact with them because there is some resistance there. Talk to your DM and see what they say on the subject. However, it doesn't specifically state that it interferes with your castings in any way, so as far as I can see, you're pretty much good to go. I enjoy Shadow Magic both thematically and mechanically. There's some very good abilities in there, and there's a lot to be said for the character development that you could make with it. So I would suggest going Shadow Sorcerer for a slightly more subtle style of play, but it doesn't mean you can't still blast things apart in the traditional sorceress fashion. I would say that abilities like Hound of Ill-Omen encourage people to look at spells that they wouldn't normally pick because of their ability to get disadvantage on saving throws. There are also some useful defenses that don't require your concentration either, and a useful backup in case things do go terribly wrong. So I think it's a good overall kind of archetype that you might want to consider playing as. Time to have a look at Storm Sorcery now, and this is probably one of the ones you go for if you just want to be pumping out the damage. So the first ability you get is Wind Speaker. This allows you to speak, read and write Primordial. It's just a language. It's not the best start in my opinion. It might be useful if you have a campaign that revolves specifically around elementals, but other than that, you're probably not going to use it very much. Tempestuous Magic is one of those abilities that you may or may not use depending on just how you perceive it. The most obvious use of this ability is to get out of an unfortunate situation where you might be surrounded. Because the movement doesn't provoke any attacks of opportunity, it's very good for getting out of encounters where you might be surrounded. However, since you're allowed to move either before or after you cast the spell, it might be worth considering actually getting into combat. If you have certain area of effects that emanate from yourself, then you might want to get all of those creatures within the same blast. Thunderwave is the first spell that comes to mind. If you're going to make full use of it, you need to have creatures that are surrounding you from all angles. So being able to jump into the middle of that group and then cast Thunderwave allows you to target so many more things. Something that's also quite important to note is that it's only the first level casting or higher that you need. It doesn't have to be a specific energy type, so it works with all kinds of spells. So this can actually be quite beneficial. Say you had to jump a chasm. You cast Jump, you go for the leap, but you're unfortunate, you roll a 1. You can at least then use a bonus action to use your Tempestuous Magic to get that extra 10 foot of fly speed. The same is true for Featherfall. Say you go for a jump, you miss it, you end up falling, cast Featherfall. Yes, you would float down to the bottom, but immediately after you cast it, go for the 10 foot fly. This will give you that probably extra 10 feet or more that you need in order to get to the ledge in order to save yourself. You can make a direct comparison between Heart of the Storm and Elemental Affinity, because they both come in at the same level. So first of all, you get resistance to lightning and thunder, as opposed to Elemental Affinity, which only gives you 1 resistance. So in that regard, it's already a better ability. You don't even have to do anything to invoke these resistances, you just have them naturally, so you save on sorcery points as well. Any number of creatures you choose within 10 feet of you when you start casting a lightning or thunder spell will take additional damage equal to half your sorcerer level. This is excellent for dealing a wave of damage to a lot of creatures. In some respects, it's not quite as good as Elemental Affinity because you don't get to cover a really large radius with it, as you would with something like a Fireball or a Cone of Cold. What it does allow you, though, is a lot more damage than Elemental Affinity is offering. Because you can use it with either lightning or thunder damage, you're not necessarily forced down the route of Elemental Adept, and to be completely honest, half your sorcerer level at max level is going to be at least 10 points of damage to everything around you. So it is actually slightly better, it's just a case of, are you going to be close enough to the creatures in order to make full use of it? Stormguide is useful for keeping your party safe from the elements during adventures, so whenever you're resting, of course, you don't have to worry about rain or anything. However, something I find particularly interesting is your ability to change the direction of the wind. Now, it says, quite specifically, that it doesn't change the speed of the wind. I can't help but think in the right situation this could be utterly devastating, considering certain wind elemental effects. Something I also wonder about is would it be possible to use this ability with certain spells that you cast? Gust of Wind is the kind of spell that pushes a creature up to 15 foot back if it's within that line. However, if you can change the direction of the wind, could you not change the direction of the wind to go upwards? In that respect, would it not just keep the creatures aloft 15 foot in the air? Any creature that doesn't save is basically stuck there, and any creature that does save is going to take some falling damage. It's something that you should definitely go over with your DM, and see if you can use it with spell effects like Gust of Wind. It might even be a benefit in the right area as well, if you're in somewhere that's very dusty, or full of leaves, or lots of sand. You might be able to cast Gust of Wind and then change the direction of the airflow. This would then give you some cover or some kind of concealment because there's sand and there's leaves and there's dirt flying up into the sky. So perhaps you could use it for a more utility-based or more defensive-based magic as well. I see Stormguide as the sort of ability that really rewards creative players, and anyone that's willing to take a chance and go for something a bit off the wall is going to get some benefit out of it. If you have an accommodating DM who likes you to use your imagination, who really likes for you to get involved with your abilities, then I can see no reason why this wouldn't be a great little utility in order to bring a lot more theme and a lot more interest to the games. Storm's Fury deals lightning damage to any creature that hits you, and it's equal to your sorcerer level, which is a lot of damage just for nothing. In situations where you're surrounded, it might just be worth armoring up with something like Blade Ward and then just letting the retributive damage deal its effect. The pushback effect is also nice. The creature does have to make a strength saving throw, so it's particularly good against melee combatants. However, there is the obvious effect that most melee things could be strength based, so it's great against panache characters but not quite so good against the brutes, but it's still a useful ability for keeping yourself somewhat safe. If the creature does hit you, you get to deal the damage back to it, and then it gets the pushback afterwards. In the right situation, attacking you could be the worst thing that a creature could do. Not only is it going to take damage, but if that pushback effect works, they could be falling off of ledges, they could be falling off of cliffs, they could be falling off of bridges. They would have to deal with all that falling damage as well. And finally we have Wind Soul. So you're going to get blanket immunity to lightning and thunder, which is a nice upgrade from your resistance. And of course you get to fly. Now we've been over flying already, but this is a 60-foot fly speed, so that's already an improvement over any of the other flying classes. The most important thing, however, is the ability to give your flying capacity to other creatures around you. By reducing your speed, the other creatures in your party can have the ability to fly. So everyone gets to do this for an hour. There's no concentration involved. This is the best flying ability I have seen. Now I don't usually like having to wait in order to do the flying. However, if you are going to use this ability, at least you're not having to concentrate, at least you're not having to cast with a very high level slot, at least it lasts for an hour rather than say a short period like 10 minutes. It's probably the best of the 3 flying abilities from the other classes, and I would definitely suggest that it's one that gets used a lot more because your whole party can take advantage of it rather than just yourself. So how do these Sorceress Origins compare to each other? Which ones give you the most benefit, and which ones fall by the wayside? I just think that the Draconic Bloodline isn't giving you anywhere near enough things that are unique to the character. They're mostly things that can be replicated with spells, and I don't really think that you're getting much that you're going to be needing in general terms either, such as your increased proficiency when dealing with dragons. It really stings putting Divine Magic in 4th place, but unfortunately there's just not enough in it to give you some variety. There's just nothing that really screams character about it. The flexible casting is really nice, and the ability to use meta magic with your other spells from either cleric or sorcerer list is fine, but there's just nothing that has any depth to it, and that's why it just doesn't make the grade for me. They should have put in more variation when it comes to different gods and the different paths that your divine soul might be on. I think this origin could be so much more if it just had some abilities that really reflected a whole variety of different gods rather than just concentrating on healing effects. It was really difficult to make the decision between Shadow Magic and Storm Sorcery, but Storm Sorcery gets 3rd place probably just because it's focused too much on specific energy types. Again, it's another kind of origin that forces you down the Elemental Adept route. You do get a little bit of leeway, and it is very good for kicking out damage, so it does actually trump a couple of the other classes in that respect, but the utilities are very situational. Now they're good for creative players, but there aren't enough instances in which you can really make them shine. They're not bad, it's just somewhere in the middle. Shadow Magic is just great because you've got things like Eyes of the Dark which progress with level. Your Hound of Ill Omen is great because you get a creature as well as the effect of heightened spell built in, and Umbral Form is just amazing for your defenses. There are just a few little things like Strength of the Grave and Shadow Walk which just aren't amazing. They're good to have, but you just don't really need them, or some of them are just too late in level. Overall, however, they're very good abilities, and they do lend themselves quite well to being experimental with different types of spells, and anything that gets you learning new things or trying new ideas is okay in my book. I might get a lot of flack for putting Wild Magic in the top spot, but in my opinion I think it's got everything that you really want. You can get advantage with ability checks, attack rolls, saving throws. Your party can get bonuses on those things as well. Controlled Chaos is amazing for manipulating the kind of effects that you can get when there's a Wild Surge, and you get an increase in damage as well from Spell Bombardment. These are just really great abilities for being useful in a variety of situations, but what I love about it the most is it doesn't force you in any particular direction because there's no logic to it. It's all about chaos, so you can just have all the abilities and all the sort of feats that you want without them actually affecting this Sorceress origin. More than that, it increases your capacity for role-playing, it forces you to deal with difficult situations, and it just makes you a better gamer overall. Also, because this origin requires your DM to be so invested in the things that you're doing, there's a lot more benefit for the person running the game as well as for you. The DM has to make a judgment as to whether or not he allows you to regain your abilities to use things like Tide of Chaos by forcing you to roll on the Wild Surge table, so it makes the two of you think about when to use abilities and when to get the bonuses, so it makes better roleplayers and better game masters out of everyone. Mechanically, this class has got pretty much everything I could want because there's a bonus to everyone and everything, so you'll always have something that you can pull out in a pinch. Thematically, I love wild magic because anything can happen, and it really makes a lot of sense that if there are areas where there are high magic, that you could have varying degrees of effects, and it really offers a lot of chances for reskinning the character and putting new effects in, coming up with your own tables, your own effects, your own wild magic, so there's loads of creativity that you can have as well. Wild magic takes the top spot because its abilities are very balanced, its abilities are in the right places, the thematics are there, and the potential for really increased role-playing and some amazing effects that are very unpredictable and can make the game so much more fun are all built into the origin itself. I put wild magic at the top spot and I don't feel any guilt in doing so. Did you guys like this second part of this Sorcerer analysis? Did it maybe sway your opinion on some of the Sorcerer's origins and now you want to play a different type of Sorcerer? Whatever you think about the Sorcerer's origins, let me know in the comments down below. Also be sure to like and subscribe and share the videos around so that the channel can grow. Make sure you leave your opinions, comments and requests so that everyone can see them, and I will see you guys next time at the gaming table.